Right into our community section with our guest and brand new city council member for Ward 4 office, Molly Coleman. So we're just going to turn it right over to Molly.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Molly, reported a small number of weeks ago, entered office last week. Can you hear me? I'm going to turn this off. No, not on there. Okay. Cool. Any better? Okay. Cool. Yeah, so I was super stoked when Shabbat invited me to come to this meeting. Ward 4, as I'm sure you all know, we have a little bit less than half of D10, but a very solid less than. Super excited to be serving on the council. I think I'll just touch briefly on his top priorities and what is particularly salient in Ward 4 right now. And certainly will invite Jenny to fill in anything that I missed. And then we have a big chunk of time, so I don't know if we can do questions maybe. Cool, or just honestly, I will say I'm here more than anything else to listen. And so if that means jumping ahead for the rest of the agenda, also excited to look at that. But a few things that led me to run and that are feeling particularly resonant in all of St. Paul, but I think especially in Ward 4. First is economic justice. Really, I see a real need to ensure that we do more to support community members throughout St. Paul to ensure that they have high quality, well-paying jobs, to ensure that people can afford to live their lives here in the city. Whether, yeah, I can also move. I don't know what the best.
Do you want to switch spots?
Yeah.
Thank you. Smart.
More problems.
Next stop is a cordless owl that we can just pass.
I like that it is actually an owl, and now I see it as I'm yeah, so priority number one, economic justice, making sure people can afford their lives here in the city. We know that costs are rising too quickly for too many members of our communities, that it is getting too hard to afford the cost of living, that property taxes are going up, that is passed along to renters, that all in all, there is a real need to really prioritize true economic justice, really raising the standards for workers throughout our city. So that's number one. I talk about this often, but really focus on what does it mean to build a robust democracy that actually serves all of us. And I think so much of that is really focusing on being responsive to the needs of our community members and showing that government can work and solve hard problems. And so really committed to making sure that we are doing the basics of local government right, that when you have a street that is being torn up, that the city is responsive and communicative, and that there's a clear understanding of why that is happening and how it is going to serve our residents, making sure that things like street plowing and trash collection and hopefully one day municipal composting and all of those things are run well and run smoothly. And then focused on what does it look like to build a city that is dense and walkable and really meets the needs of the 21st century and of our population as it currently stands. So how are we welcoming new neighbors? How are we making the city work for our current neighbors? What does it look like to meet the housing needs of our city? What does it look like to invest in public transportation, multimodal transportation? How do we use that as a tool to build our climate-friendly future that we need to see? So it's kind of a few of the things that are very, very top of mind for me. Obviously, I think Ward 4 has some unique challenges and opportunities. We just had a meeting, what was that, 2 days ago, about some of the challenges and opportunities in Como specifically. We know that we have Midway, where there is a lot of need, a lot of investment that is going to be super important over the upcoming years. We know that we have different challenges and opportunities throughout the ward. So like I said, I'm here more than anything else to listen and to figure out how the Ward 4 office can be as supportive as possible in the work that you all are doing. Obviously, again, you all know Jenny quite well, so I know that you already have the line to the office. Yeah, I didn't have much else prepared. So would love to, if there are questions, thoughts, anything that is helpful for you.
So we'll just open it up to the floor for questions from others in the room or here.
You've sort of talked about macro level things that
are certainly laudable, you know, affordability and economic justice. Are there some sort of specific areas in the city that you really want to focus on? I know Snelling and University is a real problem. Do you have any sort of ideas for how you're going to navigate some of that and you know, some maybe ideological differences on the council, how you can sort of steer through those? I know that there are definitely some differences. It's a little bit polarized on the council.
Yeah, they're great questions. So starting with Snelling and University, that is such a huge priority. I think obviously for folks in Midway, but I really do hear it throughout the ward and throughout the city is people recognize that that's a critical intersection. It's a critical part of our community. And so if we continue to let it be disinvested in, it's going to hurt all of us. I think that there are a few things that are top priority. First is dealing with the CVS. We're working hard diligently on improving our vacant buildings ordinance in the city of St. Paul. That work has been started in the Ward 4 office. Jenny's been continuing it. So making sure that we continue to move that forward. Also looking at other tools for holding CVS accountable, and was actually just declared a nuisance by the city. So I think things are moving in the right direction in terms of ensuring that we don't allow that vacant property that leads to both crime and safety issues, but also just that sense of disinvestment in the neighborhood that is completely unacceptable. So that has to be top priority. I think it's such a visible symbol of everything that has been such a challenge at that intersection that to me has to come first. Obviously, we're starting to see some of the long promised development around Allianz. I think that is another step in the right direction. It's not everything that we ever hoped it would be, but it is going to be a lot better than vacant lots that are too often filled with needles. So that's, you know, again, cautiously optimistic that things are going in the right direction there. We've talked a lot about the need to fully fund the homeless assistance response team and really making sure that we have support for community members who are really struggling, who need that ongoing sustained outreach, that access to continued support. So that will be that is going to continue to be important, along with working with Beacon and other community partners who are invested in that neighborhood, who are working to serve community members in need there, but aren't always getting it exactly right. So I think that there's a lot more that is needed there. And then it's going to be continuing to invest in what is working, right? Like we see new businesses that want to be there. We're seeing immigrant-owned businesses. We're seeing places like Dilla that are saying we want to be in Midway. We want to be at Snelling and University. So really continuing to make sure that they have the support that they need, that people can continue to make that investment. And I guess the final piece is really working to ensure that we continue to have more housing options around Snelling and University. Bringing more people in is going to help meet our housing needs, but also it's going to make the community safer. We have more folks who are on the street, who are making that area home. You're just going to have, it's not going to immediately solve some of the safety issues that we're seeing, but it will help. So I think that it's a multi-pronged strategy. It's going to be a multi-year process, but I do think that things are moving in the right direction. I also think that it's going to be on the Ward 4 and Ward 1 offices to keep the pressure up on the city to make it a priority. I will say, even in my first week, it's clear that rightfully, to some extent, a lot of the city's attention is focused on the needs of downtown. That's great. That's important. But we need some extra support in Midway as well. And it's a lot of the same challenges. And so making sure that Midway doesn't get pushed off to the side while we focus on downtown is a top priority for me. So that's on the first question. On the second question of ideological differences on the council, I think one of the nice things about coming in is whatever has happened, and I'm new and have a good relationship with everybody on the council and get to, haven't worked with anybody on the council in a professional capacity previously. So get to come in and say, hey, I'm here. I think we are pretty values aligned on the council. I think that folks are generally pretty vision aligned, even if there are, of course, there will always be differences in understanding or in approach in sort of, the minutia. That's to be expected, and we wouldn't want it to be otherwise. But I do think being able to come in and say, as long as we all agree that we love St. Paul, we want to move the city forward, we should be able to work together. That is certainly my expectation. So yeah, that's where I'm coming at it from. I don't think that I don't want to be a Pollyanna about it. But I think all you can do is come and say, look, we need to get to 4 votes. We need to move the city forward. Nobody wants the infighting. Nobody wants the drama. Like, I did not have a single person when I was campaigning say like, please go in there and get in fights with other people. So,
Just one more point, then I'll let some other people talk, but it would be nice to see some market rate housing. I know there's been a lot of affordable housing built in that area. And my concern is sort of all the affordable housing is just sort of being ghettoized into one area. And it should be really spread throughout the city. And I think Midway needs some more market rate housing as well. And I also think Bill McGuire is ready to, help out. And I don't think he should be demonized. The owner of the loons, I think the city should work with him because I think he could be a good partner in that area.
yeah, I totally agree. We've had people who have suggested things like, well, what if we just have a billionaire come in and buy every building in downtown St. Paul? And personally, I think that leads to a lot of other problems. Forget that is exactly how we got here. But it is one of the things that makes me feel like we have so much opportunity in Midway at Snelling University. Is we do have Dr. McGuire who wants to be building things and wants to invest, and that doesn't mean he should buy up everything in Midway. But it is an opportunity, and we would be extremely remiss if we didn't treat it as one. And then I will just add on the housing point, it is abundantly clear. We actually just had a presentation today at our HRA, housing, I'm going to forget what HRA stands for. Housing Redevelopment Authority meeting from the Planning and Economic Development Department Director about how, yes, affordable housing is essential. We can't lose sight of the need for more affordable housing. And part of how we get there is by having more market rate housing. And we need to understand the entire economic ecosystem in which we're operating if we are serious about making our city affordable for people.
What are some other ways you plan on prioritizing developing more housing?
Yeah.
Particularly dense housing?
Yeah, a super good question. One that came up at our council meeting today. So there are a few things. Obviously we've made big zoning changes over the last few years in the city. That's good. I think that there's a lot more work to do in terms of encouraging the development of more types of housing throughout the city. That also comes with a lot of pushback. And we know that there is a lot of generalized support for increased density in the city of St. Paul, but we also need to show that we can make it work in a way that maintains the quality of life that people expect here. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really focused on, especially because in Ward 4, we have some of the few neighborhoods that actually are seeing increased density in the city. And so making sure that that comes with increased support for building pedestrian infrastructure, with, increased parking enforcement. I think it's incredible that St. Paul is one of the first cities to move away from parking minimums. We need to make sure that now people aren't parking their cars in the middle of intersections in a way that creates hazards for walkers and bikers and other drivers. So I think that, doing density right in terms of maintaining quality of life is going to be really, really important there. The other piece of sort of the equation to me is figuring out the financing piece. I think that what cities often see is that they do the first step of promoting increased density, which is changing their zoning code, making it easier to build in theory, but don't figure out the financing piece. So people aren't actually able to afford the type of multi-unit dense housing that we want to see. And I don't know what the answer is yet. But I think that is, in talking to folks from around the country who see a lot of cities get as far as we have in the move towards more zoning, what they have described is that a lot of people get
That's my question. It remains just an oddity to me. In some ways, we have these snow. What did they do last year? The snow plow.
With no summit?
A summit of snow plowing. And yet, what does it mean for us?
Yeah. So just on the first piece about how I too want to be in a city that does big progressive things and takes big swings. And I think that is so deeply compatible with wanting to be a city that gets the basics right. And the example that I always give is we really need to do municipal composting here. You should be able to put your compost out and have it picked up. That it will be it's a critical way to reduce our city waste. Right now we have, I think, 3 composting sites in the city, and they are not distributed in a particularly equitable way across the city. This is not exactly a huge swing, but I think it's a very good, smart, sound policy that the city should be investing in. And it is extremely hard to make the case to people that the city of St. Paul should start picking up your compost when we had to declare a state of emergency to get trash picked up in the city of St. Paul, which is something that most cities do without declaring a state of emergency. And there's, you can dig into why that happened, and there's lots of blame to go around and all of the things, but on a basic level, I don't think that a city should be trusted to do big and bold and new things if we aren't showing that we can do the basics that people depend on. And again, like, we all know why plowing matters. It's not just like a little annoying thing. It's how people get to work. It's how we make sure that people have the ability to, whatever, all things. So I very much agree that it is a question that we should be asking. In terms of what the city should be doing, I mean, I'm glad that we tried the pilot that we did last year around sort of permanent street one-sided parking. I think that things like that I do think that we're going to need to get more creative, because obviously what we are doing isn't working. I know that's something that my predecessor, Mitra Jalali, spoke about extensively, is just the need to do more to support people to get their cars off of the streets, making sure that we're opening more lots, making sure that we're making it easier for people to get to and from those lots. And then that if people don't take advantage of the opportunities that we are making abundantly accessible, then we need to make sure that we are towing people and ticketing people, and that there are consequences. I think that if we do our job right and make it really easy to do the right thing, understanding all of the obstacles that people face, then there needs to be more accountability, because at the end of the day, we can't plow our streets if there are cars on the street that are impeding the plows from operating. Like, there's no magic solution that I have found anybody propose that doesn't involve people moving their cars off of the streets and then plowing the streets. And I think that there is, you can get into how are we working with public works on all of that, and how are we communicating better about problem areas. And I think that there's a lot of basic constituent services that can be improved throughout the city, but sort of on a policy level, make it easier for people to move their cars, hold them accountable if they don't move their cars.
Thank you.
We have a couple things happening in the chat, and just right before Dan, I believe, has a question next. Laura just said that she would appreciate less big swings and more steady bunts. And then we had to define bunts. We got there, baseball term. And, but so just a comment from Laura. Dan, I believe you have a question, unless you want me to.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
All righty, Councilmember Coleman.
No.
Sorry? You can hear me? Okay, thanks for coming to the meeting. Appreciate it. And I guess a few just thoughts. This, maybe a question. Can you?
Oh, Dan, you're kind of going in and out right now. I think you typed your question in earlier, so until we get you back, I'll go ahead. So Dan had a comment regarding the city council being younger, and would appreciate what are they doing to consider the needs of under-resourced older residents of the city, especially around transportation, bus stops, etc.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think that this is always a question that St. Paul should be answering, kind of regardless of the composition of the council. It is something that we need to be really mindful of, especially as more of our residents are aging. We want them to be able to age in place in the city. There's a whole host of different things that we need to be thinking about. One is, how are we creating space for people to age in the city? So, in Ward 4, we don't exactly have a plethora of senior living. We have some in Como, we have some in Midway. We don't have enough to meet the needs of the population that wants to be aging in the city of St. Paul. So when we talk about housing, it's not just talking about apartments for young people. It's not just talking about sort of single family homes. It's also thinking about how are we creating the senior living opportunities for folks, like Episcopal homes, like Chicago, like places, that we have a few of, but not enough of. Making sure people don't have to be on a multi-year waiting list if they want to stay in the city of St. Paul. So that's one thing. I think that making sure that we are, then building that infrastructure around sort of those communities, and recognizing that not everybody's going to live in a senior living community, knowing that people will continue to live in single family homes, continue to live in multi-age apartment buildings and complexes. But when we're thinking about how are we designing our infrastructure systems, how are we working with Metro Transit on providing busing apartments? I feel like I'm very frozen.
Yeah.
Sorry to Dan. I can keep it.
Are the folks
I
on
feel
Zoom
bad.
hearing?
No, I think they're frozen.
They're, on mine, they're not.
Okay, can they hear?
Yeah, they can hear.
Oh, great, okay.
Perfect.
Cool. So yeah, I think that there are some basic things that we know that we need to get right. Housing, transportation, et cetera. Beyond that, I don't know that I have answers. And I think that that is where, when we're thinking about what our constituent services that we're developing, how are we being responsive to the needs of the community, making sure that we're not just hearing from folks in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, but really representing the entire age continuum in the city is essential. Hope you heard that. I'm sorry for that.
We're giving it. I think we're gonna keep moving on. We've got a lot of folks in here, so we're gonna keep moving on within the room. If you guys have questions, this is your chance.
I know opinions vary, probably even in this room on this issue, but just personally, I think the rent control ordinance was just disastrous, just a horrible thing for the city. What are your takes on rent control? Are there any efforts afoot to sort of see if we can reverse at least parts of that?
So my full answer on rent control is I supported the initial ballot initiative. I think for the sort of, St. Paul is a city that has the ability to take big swings. And I appreciated the effort, and what I appreciated about that originally is that voters in St. Paul said, we have a big problem, and that's housing affordability, and we need to think differently about housing. I also don't think that we see housing affordability at all with rent stabilization. I think that it did some good things, and I think it had some fairly significant unintended consequences. So when the council, obviously I was not on the council in the spring when they voted to permanently exempt all new construction. Had I been, I would have supported that, and said so publicly at the time. I think that the things that kind of contributed to my thinking there, one is so not new construction that received quite a bit of attention, rightfully. I think that when we have a housing shortage of thousands, tens of thousands of units, we need to take that very seriously. And people are like, that's a cave in to developers. Well, it's acknowledging that we need to build housing in the city of St. Paul. And I heard from for-profit developers, but I also heard from nonprofit developers who are saying that the way things were working in the city of St. Paul was making it too hard for them to build here. So that was really important to me. I think the other kind of factors that we started to see, and we don't have all of the data yet, and it's unfortunate that we have to make decisions before we can fully understand the ramifications, but I think we were starting to see data suggesting that because of some of the changes that the council had made, or the city had made pretty quickly, the renters most likely to benefit from rent stabilization were wealthier and whiter renters, and that lower income renters of color were more likely to see higher rises in or increases in their rent. So I think that when we have a policy that is even starting to show impacts or suggestions of disparate impacts, that in a city that has a significant racial wealth gap, we need to take that very seriously. So all that to say, I think that the steps that were taken by the council were the right ones. I think that we now, I hope, it is my intention to move beyond the rent stabilization conversation. I think that we have been kind of stuck in this as our entire housing affordability conversation for 3-4 years at this point. We need to move forward and start talking about, okay, we still have a significant number of units in the city that are protected by rent stabilization. You might like that, you might not like that, but that's what the voters voted for. We've made this pro-development change. What else can we be doing to meet the housing needs of the city? So that's where I'm at.
Kind of leads a little bit towards my question, which I guess isn't really a question of this kind of comment that you can kind of rip out if you want to, but my greatest challenge that I see with the city is a challenge with raising revenues in an environment where federal and state budgets are cutting funding to county and cities. It's really challenging for cities like St. Paul to raise revenues outside of property taxes, right? Ramsey County just announced like just south of 10% property tax increase. I'm sure that the mayor's address tomorrow will address some property tax increases in the city. So all of this talk around market rate housing and driving, increased growth and all that stuff is about finding ways to increase revenues for the cities. And so I would just be kind of curious about your view on how we can find easy solutions. I mean, there is no easy solution, but find ways to raise revenues for the city.
I mean, it is, to me, it's the foundational challenge in the city of St. Paul right now. It's also. It has long been St. Paul's reality that we have a small tax base. We have a shrinking tax base and it is, I think, at crisis levels for our city's ability to provide the services that we want to provide and rein in costs for people who live here, again, whether it's property taxes or whether it's increased rent because your landowner, your landlord's property taxes are being passed on to you. So what is super frustrating about it is that there's no magic revenue that we're gonna get, right? Like the federal government is obviously not coming to help us, and they are in fact dramatically exacerbating our financial challenges and increasing the sort of social safety net needs of the residents of St. Paul. And that is going to continue for at least 3.5 years. There's, I think that there's a lot of conversations about, well, can we have a lot of untaxed land? Are there ways that we can get institutions like St. Thomas, like some other private colleges to contribute more to the city? Sure, I think that's possible. And it's something that the city's talked about, for a while now. I think it would be a good thing to explore. I don't think that is going to fundamentally solve our basic economic equations. Like St. Thomas could chip in $100,000 a year. That would be great. It's not going to stop our property taxes from going up or allow us to actually do the programming that we need for residents. The only thing to my mind that gets us to the sustainable revenue and the significant tax base that we need is to build the tax base, right? Like we just need to bring in investment and development. That obviously should not be seen as a blank check or a blank check. That doesn't mean that we want unchecked development and investment. And I do think that we need to be careful in these conversations to say that there are parameters from my perspective, what types of investment and development we want here. If Amazon wanted to take over downtown St. Paul, I would have big concerns about that. And I think that saying that there have to be limits. We have to say we care about workers, we care about affordable housing. We don't want every single unit in the city to be for ultra rich people, A, because that would not work as a model, B, because that does not align with our equity goals and everything else, even if it would bring in more revenue. So anyway, I'm rambling. Because it's the end of a Wednesday, and B, because
It wasn't a question.
Just
we just need a lot more. I mean, we need more jobs here, we need more housing, we need more investment, we need less untaxed land, and that's not going to change in any big way anytime soon. I mean, there are some opportunities, right? So we have the sale of Luther Seminary, happening in St. Anthony Park. We have the West Rock site, which was, a really important site in Midway, but also I think there's a lot of opportunity to build more on that site and generate new revenue there, building more dense housing. It's just going to take an all of the above approach, I think, to get us to where we need to be in terms of revenue and tax base. So
you're, it sounds like you're saying that you're opposed to TIFs.
I'm not. I will say I'm not entirely opposed to TIFs. I think that so tax increment financing can be a tool
that's for the definition.
I think it is a tool that a city can use to bring in development, particularly in neighborhoods and in parts of the city that aren't seeing development. I think that it is a tool that can also be dramatically overused and result in development that is not actually contributing to the city's coffers. And so I think that, the way that it currently works in St. Paul, you have to satisfy a but-for test, and it is supposed to be that the construction would not happen, that there would not be development in that neighborhood at that site if there was not tax increment financing utilized. I think that it is something that a city can be really, and St. Paul, I think, risks going too far in one direction of handing it out left and right. But I think that there has been rightfully a lot of pushback on that. But no, I'm not entirely opposed. I think that we need to be cautious in how we use it. But I think that the city of St. Paul is not in a position to kind of entirely dismiss any potential pro-development tool.
I had a comment. This is small swing, not big swing, but small swing, but it also
potentially could affect this body, and that is last meeting, we had a person that was representing the company that helped establish parking for a fee during the state fair in Falcon Heights. It was a very interesting talk, I thought. It seemed to me there's a lot of issues there's a lot of problems to solve and things to think through. It seems like the city will certainly take the dominant role on that, but that's something the council could feed into or participate in some way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This is something that we talked about on Monday or Tuesday. It's come up a lot around the state fair, but I think it's also come up in other contexts in Ward 4, just other places where, look, if we are, if you're having a big sporting event in a neighborhood, is that a model that we should be using more of? And I think that there's good reason to think that there is more positive impact from the type of model that Falcon Heights used during the state fair than from like a permanent parking situation, which even talking, there are a lot of folks who really want permanent parking in their neighborhoods. There are a lot of people who really hate the permanent parking system in their neighborhood. I don't think it actually solves all the problems that we're trying to solve for. So I think that the Falcon Heights model is one that I'm super interested in. I think that there's a lot of interest in the city, again, around the state fair, but also more broadly.
Second thing, small thing, but important, we talked about a year ago, which was the streetlight copper thefts, which are still ongoing. I was surprised, but there hasn't been totally solved yet. So anyway, that's something maybe we don't contribute directly to it, but certainly have an interest in.
Yeah, it's again another huge issue kind of throughout the city. Although I do feel like Como has been hit harder than most parts of the city. I was talking to Sean Kershaw, the head of public works, about this somewhat recently. And what he described is, the state law was changed, you don't have to have a license to sell the copper. And the enforcement of that is pretty minimal. So that is kind of where he described the breakdown from feeling like we got this policy change that was supposed to make a big difference and we're not seeing the impact that we had wanted. So he described it as a state level enforcement issue with the purchasers, not actually requiring permits. I don't know how much of that is within the city's control. I do think obviously what is in the city's control is when we're replacing streetlights, are making sure that we're utilizing a more secure. It's like we have these really cute streetlights. They're extremely, as we now all know, insecure, and that causes big problems. So we might have to forego some aesthetic things, but I think that we would all agree it was worth it. But yeah, I will say that's as far as I've gotten in terms of kind of what that might look like, but I know it is a huge concern.
How do you view your relationship with community councils and working with us?
Yeah. A huge resource that the city of St. Paul has. I mean, I think that we are so lucky to have community councils, district councils in Ward 4 in particular. We have extremely active district councils and community councils. I think that it is extremely incumbent upon the city council to both recognize that as a benefit that we have in the city and something that we should be taking advantage of, and that if the council operates effectively and strategically, we can really make a big difference in communities because of the relationship with community councils. Obviously, there's some other like more tangible things like allocating some financial decisions and whatnot about like support in the city for community councils. And I think that there is, particularly in the Ward 4 office, a big commitment to making sure that we're investing in community councils and district councils.
I wonder where that could be coming from.
Question.
This is a big swing thing. The Timberwolves are going to be looking.
Oh, yeah.
Long ago, Norm Coleman made a big, he angered a lot of people and got the Wild and Arena built. There was a lot of pushback to that. Was St. Paul doing anything to maybe reach out to the Wolves, or would you consider trying to lure the Wolves to St. Paul?
To me, that's what it looks. So that is the actual question at hand. I would love to have the Lynx play extremely close to my house. I honestly, like, I've heard some community members have asked me about it. I have not heard anybody. I've been in City Hall for, so I haven't heard any serious push there. I think that there is, we just renamed the Grand Casino Arena, the Grand Casino Arena, yeah, today. And I think that in and of itself has been some, we've had some challenging conversations recently about kind of continued investment, and I think that's really important. I think that's a huge economic driver for the city. It brings in, it's close to $500 million a year in economic revenue for the metro area. So I'm glad that we have the Wild playing here. I'm glad that we have the Loons playing here. I think that having a vibrant city means having things that make people want to come here and make people want to spend money here. Somebody the other day was like, we should just knock down like 5 buildings in downtown St. Paul and put the Timberwolves there. And I was like, I'm not there.
Perfect.
Or, yeah, I don't, so I'm now just.
Understood.
John, I think you started trying to howl really loud and see if they.
We had one comment in the chat from Dan. I think this is a while back, so it's probably the context a little bit earlier, but it said rezoning industrial and commercial land to residential reduces tax base and increases city service costs. We need to preserve and encourage CI, commercial and industrial land.
Yeah,
Sure.
I don't know if you want my thoughts on this, Dan, but I will share them. Which is that I agree. And I think actually there's some really interesting conversations about this happening in Ward 4 right now with some of, with the West Rock site, right? I think everybody, so West Rock sort of West Midway, South St. Anthony Park area. I think that there's a lot of excitement about the idea of housing in that space. And I share a lot of that. I think that that would be an incredible spot to be welcoming more neighbors. I also think that we need people to have good jobs in the city of St. Paul, and we need jobs that don't require a master's degree, right? We need to have a whole host of solid jobs at that site. We used to have thousands of high quality union jobs. More recently, we've had hundreds of union jobs. But I do think that when we think about what does development look like, housing is huge. And to one of the conversations earlier, we have to think about our economy holistically. We need to think about what does our city need comprehensively, and that has to involve having commercial and industrial space. I think that one example that I'm really interested in is the Heights over on the greater east side, where they have housing, but they're also going to have like industry. And so you're going to be able to have kind of a comprehensive community neighborhood that meets a lot of different needs for our city and for our residents. So I think that that is certainly should not be lost. And we're actually a ward, those of us in Ward 4, that does have a pretty significant commercial and industrial base. And I think that that is something to take pride in and to invest in, and to make sure that we don't have conversations about, it's all housing or it's all commercial, industrial, right? We need both to have our city function.
I've decided we should have a new term. It's not your neighborhood, it's your neighborhood where you can work there. That's right. TM. We're obviously a very formal board. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us and for taking our questions and for considering how you're going to lure a whole pack of wolves. Hopefully we see you again. You are certainly welcome to stay, but if you need to leave, we understand. We are feeling great about our strong connection to the word of our office. So welcome again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody. I'm going to sit. Is it okay if I stay?
Yeah.